Hello everyone, this is a third lecture of Economic Issues in Public Administration. In this lecture, I will explain supply and demand theory. Please note that this lecture takes 2 days, January 3rd and 4th, because this is the most important and difficult part for beginners of economics. Without understanding supply and demand, you cannot say you studied economics. You may face some difficulties to understand this part, but please repeat reading the book if that is the case. Also, you might view this video several times. As I mentioned, supply and demand is a theory which justifies the position of classic economics. So let me review the position of classic economics. A founder of classic economics, Adam Smith, argued that the invisible hand interactions of consumers, workers, and firms determine prices. In turn, prices determine the allocative decisions about which goods and services to produce, how to produce them, and who gets them. As I explained in the previous lecture, the main focus of economics is to solve scarcity. So they believe that the interactions of self-interested individuals can solve scarcity. It is quite important to note that the invisible hand works only in a free market. Free market means perfectly competitive markets. In other words, classic economists believe that invisible hand can bring efficient allocative decisions through competition. I just listed 5 important conditions of free markets. The first 3 are traditional. There are many buyers and sellers in the market. Firms can freely enter or exit the market. Firms sell identical products, so they can compete. The last 2 are relatively new. Everyone has full information about price and quality of goods. We will learn this as imperfect information in the lecture 5. And cost of trading a law, this is about transaction cost. We will learn this in the lecture 8. As a result of these conditions, the competitive market will have the outcome that any single buyer or seller cannot affect the market price much. Each buyer and seller becomes a price taker rather than price maker, because there are many buyers and sellers. These prices are determined by interaction of such many buyers and sellers. Now we move to a theory which explains how such many buyers and sellers interact in a free market. We first will learn buyer side, that is consumers. And we will learn demand curve, which represents, simply saying, willingness and ability to buy goods. In other words, demand curve represents the quantity demanded by consumers at a certain price. This is a graph for demand curve. As you see, demand curve is described on y and x coordinate graph. This type of coordinate graph is used much in economics. Vertical axis here takes price, and the horizontal axis here takes quantity. So this graph shows a relationship between price and the quantity of pork. Whenever you see this type of graph of price and quantity, you should remember ceteris paribus. We assume that all other factors remain constant or same. For instance, price and quantity of beef remains same. Government would not change any regulations regarding pork production. Additionally, since we analyze quantity, we should set a specific time duration according to ceteris paribus. Consumption of pork for 1 month will be much smaller than that for 1 year, of course. So when we graph the relationship between price and quantity, we should indicate specific time duration. In this graph, I set the time duration as a year. I've just explained the premise of this coordinate graph for supply and demand theory. Let's talk about the main issue, law of demand. As you see, demand curve goes down. When price goes down, quantity increases. So this demand curve shows a negative relationship between price and quantity of pork. At this point, we should remember the law of diminishing marginal utility. Demand curve represents willingness and ability of consumers to purchase goods. So consumers' satisfaction or willingness with additional unit of a good will diminish when they consume more of a good. On the other hand, ability can be interpreted as budget or income of consumers. For instance, even if consumers demand a good, if they don't have enough budget or income to purchase that, they cannot make a decision to buy it. To consider that factor, however, we need another analytical tool, budget line. In this lecture, I don't cover that tool. So in this course, demand curve mainly means willingness or utility. So demand curve mainly relies on the law of diminishing marginal utility. In sum, demand curve goes down in the coordinate graph of price and quantity according to the law of demand, where consumers demand more of a good when the price is lower. One thing you might feel weird in the previous slide would be the name of demand curve, because in the previous slide, demand curve was a straight line rather than curve. The main reason why the demand curve was straight line is ceteris paribus assumption. Since other factors remain constant, demand is affected only by two variables, price and quantity. However, in actuality, consumers' demand will be affected by many other factors, including price of beef and chicken, government regulation, and a change of economic size. You can get more detailed explanation from this website, Illinois Central Colleges. And I really recommend you to see sometimes such outside sources because my slide and then lecture time is limited. So sometimes if you really don't understand some economic concepts, you might seek the web resources to explain economic concepts. So now we understand we are seeing simplified demand curve, which is determined by its price. In this graph, when the price of pork is $3.3, quantity of pork is 220 million kilograms. And when price goes up to $4.3, the quantity of pork is 200 million kilograms. So these two different demand of consumers represents movement along the demand curve caused by a change in the price of the product. And this is the end of this video. In the next video, I'll explain a shift of demand curve. The shift occurs when factors other than price changes.